waiting for a man who says he's going to blow the lid off the secrets of the religion of the stars, to tell the story of the dark side of the Church of Scientology.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is a short video this morning to further comment on something that I put on my blog today about an article done by Tracey McManus that appeared in the Tampa Bay Times over the weekend. And I will put a link to my blog post because there are more documents there, but I just want to comment on some of the things that are contained in this article and some additional information. First of all, Tracey McManus is an excellent investigative reporter, one of the few that remain in the United States working for a newspaper. And she has done a series of articles about Scientology's efforts to make a land grab in Clearwater and virtually take over the entire city, both through purchases of properties by the church and purchases of properties by Scientology parishioners or LLCs or front groups or front companies that have been set up for the purpose of buying downtown property in Clearwater, much of which remains vacant. Her new article that appeared on Sunday is this one. Email detailed plans to obscure Scientologist role in Clearwater project. Excuse me. That article goes into the story of how an outside developer named Rodney Riley has been brought into Clearwater to develop a property or make a development north of downtown Clearwater. And this is north of the Scientology Sandcastle or Advanced Org. What struck me when I read this article and the details which are contained in it, and I will also have a link to this article in the description of this video, was the fact that this is all happening, and this effort to buy up land and property and develop an area is just north of the Sandcastle on the coast. Now, the Sandcastle has become a bit of a white elephant for Scientology. With the development of Coachman Park, the amphitheater that has been constructed there is going to make auditing and training in the course rooms at the Sandcastle virtually impossible. The noise will be too much, and also the fact that there will now be many thousands of people who are not Scientologists coming to the park and occupying that park will makes the Sandcastle no longer a tenable property for Scientology. And they're going to have to construct a new Advanced Org for Flag. Now, they could, of course, move that Advanced Org into one of the other buildings. I mean, they've got tons of buildings in Clearwater that are not occupied. They could also move it into any of the purchased properties that are owned by Scientologists around the downtown area. But that's not typically how Miscavige wants to do things. The Sandcastle is located right on the water. It's a sort of a glamorous location that has been promoted all over the world for many years, that, you know, come to the Sandcastle, sit in the restaurant, overlook the water, the sunsets, this is part of the allure that has been presented to Scientologists to come to Flag. Miscavige isn't going to want to move the Advanced Org and Sandcastle inland anywhere where it's no longer on the water. He will want to promote whatever new advanced org he is wanting to build as bigger and better and still on the water or still by the water. The problem with that is that the waterfront properties that are north of the sandcastle, and there isn't anything available south, he could only move it to an area north, are not properly zoned for what he would want to be doing. So they have to change the law in order to be able to construct a new advanced org. It is pretty clear in the current climate that the city of Clearwater would never change the laws of what structures and uses are available in order to help Scientology. The only way that they could go about doing this is to bring in someone who is going to present to the city the idea that he is developing something completely different and unrelated to Scientology, get the laws changed, and then suddenly have a change of heart. He can't go forward. The plans aren't working out. The financing has fallen through. Oh my God! So he has to sell up and get out of town. And of course, the people that would buy it would be Scientology. And then if the city decided that they were going to change the laws back to how they were, Scientology would scream bloody murder and claim that this was hate and discrimination and probably sue the city and may well win. So it is my belief that they have constructed a very elaborate scheme to accomplish this objective of changing the laws in the zone where they would want to build a new advanced org, and then at whatever time is convenient, swoop in and purchase all those properties back and make their development. There have been far more elaborate schemes than this that have been concocted by Scientology over the years. Believe me. And it is not out of the realm of possibility that they are simply lying when they issued the denials that they have issued. And the denials have been very, very vehement. And it's funny, I don't even understand why, if this developer has nothing to do with Scientology, he would issue such a vehement denial. I mean, if he wanted to get in good with the city, he wouldn't be denying any connection to Scientology and claiming that this was he was being incorrectly identified. And he'd just say, hey, I'm not with Scientology. I think they're just a cult, and just move on with doing what he's doing. It would not make any difference to him. In fact, it could be beneficial to him to take the other side of the equation than he is taking. The denials themselves and the attacks on Tracey McManus, claiming that she's a bigot and a hater, but not really responding to any of the substance, not just of this story, but of the previous stories that she has already written, is a telltale sign, in my view, that there is more going on with this particular thing than meets the eye, and certainly more than Scientology is willing to admit to at this point. Scientology has no problem lying to the media. The media are like Hubbard called them the chaos merchants. Lying to them to protect or forward the interests of Scientology is what any Scientologist would do, let alone Sea Org members or people that are engaged in a major project like this to scoop up a bunch of land and make it possible for them to build a new advanced org. There was another thing in the article that was mentioned that hit my radar with, oh, wait a minute. And that was the involvement of this guy, Brian Andrus. And Tracey reports a company controlled by Brian Andrus, a developer and Scientology parishioner, built Marina Bay 880 on Osceola Avenue. Now, this is right in the middle of this zone of development that we're talking about. But the article goes on to say Riley, this out-of-town developer from Arizona, lives in a condo unit in Marina Bay 880 and claimed that the unit was the only one I found that was available for lease. It goes on a little further. In an interview last year, Riley confirmed he also took over construction management for 8 unfinished townhomes being built next to the luxury condo towers Marina Bay 880, where he now lives, which was built by Brian Andrus. Now, why might Brian Andrus be of such great interest? Well, I happen to know who Brian Andrus is, and perhaps many people do not, but let me just say that someone like Brian Andrus does not ever change his spots. Brian Andrus was an operative of the old Guardian's office, not just any operative. He was, for a time, the head of the intelligence bureau of the Guardian's office for the entirety of the United States. He has a very, very interesting history that I'm going to explain a bit to you. You may have seen an article that I did on my blog and a YouTube video that I did called DOJ's Scathing Takedown of Scientology. If you haven't looked at those or read them, I recommend that you do. Those articles cover, or that YouTube video and that article covers the sentencing memorandum that the Department of Justice filed in the case of Mary Sue Hubbard and 10 other leading officials when they were prosecuted for having spied on, infiltrated, and engaged in breaking and enterings, et cetera, of U.S. government offices and various other places. There is another document from that case, which is titled the Stipulation of Evidence. And that document recounts all of the facts in the case that were agreed to by both the government and the defendants in the case as being uncontested. That stipulation of evidence, you can find it on my blog post today in its entirety if you click on the link there. But there are some excerpts that I want to show you from that stipulation that are kind of remarkable in that they talk about the activities of Brian Andrus. And Brian Andrus is identified in an early part of the stipulation as being in these positions in the Guardian's office. He was also involved with this guy named Michael Meisner. And Michael Meisner is a very, very significant person in the history of Scientology because Michael Meisner was one of the Guardian's office agents. There were 2 of them who were arrested by the FBI inside the IRS with false IDs. They were there to steal documents. And this was the beginning of what ultimately became the raids and then prosecution of Scientology. Michael Meisner was whisked off to Los Angeles. The Guardian's office did not want him testifying to the FBI or a grand jury or anyone about what he had been engaged in until they figured out what their story was going to be and how they were going to deal with what was now a catastrophe. So Meisner was taken to LA and put in a safe house by the Guardian's office. And this is where it gets really interesting. We read in this stipulation of evidence that on April 29, Mr. Andrus, Brian Andrus, met with Mr. Meisner at Mr. Meisner's South Serrano Street apartment and informed him that from that day on, he would be placed under guard. Mr. Meisner told Andrus that he would not accept the presence of guards. Mr. Meisner also made it clear that if he were charged as a fugitive, he would not enter a guilty plea. He complained that his whole situation had been mishandled by the Guardian's office and had resulted in his becoming a fugitive. That's a fugitive from the FBI. There was an arrest warrant out for him. He demanded that the defendant Helt, that was Henning Helt, explain to him what action was being taken regarding his case. At the end of that meeting, Mr. Andrus placed the guards outside Mr. Meisner's apartment. It goes on. Southeast U.S. Secretary Brian Andrus and 3 guards visited Mr. Meisner at approximately 2:15 a.m. on April 30. This is the next day. The defendant Wiegand warned Mr. Meisner that he would no longer be permitted to make demands and threats on the church, unquote, and, quote, that he was to start becoming a decent, cooperative, contributing part of the venture, and nothing else was to be tolerated, unquote. With the guards' assistance, the defendant, Willardson, searched Mr. Meisner's apartment and personal property and removed any evidence connecting Mr. Meisner to the Church of Scientology. At approximately 6:30 a.m., the meeting concluded with the guards in charge. So that was Brian Andrus was there at that meeting. And then we get to the final bit. On May 1, at approximately 6 p.m., Brian Andrus, Peter Alvet, Information Bureau official Chuck Reese, and 2 bodyguards visited Mr. Meisner and told him that he was to be moved to another apartment. Mr. Meisner refused to leave, threatening to cause a commotion if forced to do so. The 2 guards handcuffed him behind his back, gagged him, and dragged him out of the building. Outside, they forced him onto the back floor of a waiting car. In the car, one of the guards held Mr. Meisner down with his feet. Mr. Meisner was taken to an apartment, which he later learned was located at 3219 Descano Drive in Los Angeles, California. After Messrs. Andrus and Alvet left, 3 guards remained in the apartment with Mr. Meisner. Further on, in the meantime, Brian Andrus on May 31 had ordered the defendant Raymond to find a secured place for Meisner to stay if and when he returned from Las Vegas. He suggested, quote, a place where he could be locked in a room that has no or a very small window and where he would have, quote, no outside contact. Realize this is talking about a federal witness who had an arrest warrant out for him. This was the activities of Brian Andrus. How he did not get indicted along with the others in this case is a real mystery to me. I have no idea why that would happen. But believe me, Brian Andrus today is a Scientologist in good standing. In fact, he's a big donator to the International Association of Scientologists, has his picture put in the IAS magazines, and is a prominent part of this program, project, plan, scheme to buy up property in north of the Sandcastle and get it newly zoned. Would Brian Andrus have any problem lying to the media about what he's doing? Not even for 1 second. He had no problem lying to the United States government and was part of a cover-up and lying to the grand jury and harboring a witness and kidnapping a witness to prevent him from testifying. That all could have ended him up in jail. Lying to the media, that's never going to end you up in prison. So is the denials, or are the denials of Scientology credible? Not even remotely. I do not believe that this is all happenstance and it's just coincidental that these people are all connected and that this land is being purchased. Not for 1 second. Only when Scientology has no choice but to admit what they have done, like in this stipulation of evidence that I'm talking about, do they ever come out and say, oh, yes, well, we agree we did that, but, you know, yeah, okay. In the meantime, what they do is simply deny, 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 and attack the sources as being haters and bigots. And that is par for the course for Scientology. This whole scene stinks to high heaven. If I was a gambling man, I would bet a lot of money on the outcome of this ultimately being that this was a scheme for Scientology to be able to get what they want in the city of Clearwater. Thanks so much for watching. Check out my other videos. Take a look at some of the things that I've been saying about why science. Oh, one other thing that you really should look at. If you haven't seen it already, take a look at my blog post, which is called Why Scientologists Lie, and the YouTube video that's on my channel about this, because it lays out how it is that Scientologists justify their proclivity for lying when it is something that they think is going to help them. Again, anyway, thank you so much for watching, and there'll be more content coming soon.